You recognize that your skill set is not set in stone. You can actually develop everything about you if you're willing to do so.
Attitude trumps talent, right? So you can have a very talented person, but their attitude ends up ruining it.
I think the hardest lessons I've learned is one, that you are replaceable, but that shouldn't determine your value.
Welcome to Energy Careers, a segment of the Energy Conversations podcast dedicated to exploring opportunities in the dynamic world of the energy sector.
Welcome to the Energy Conversations podcast, where we unpack the people powering the transition. In today's Energy Careers segment, we are joined by two professionals who are blazing trails in AI and renewable energy. We are joined by Tebogo and Janus, who are entrepreneurs in this sector. We are going behind the scenes of their career paths, where we understand the grids, pivots, and the purpose that brought them here. And basically also understanding what the future of energy work might look like for the up and coming next generation.
To kick things off, I'll start with you, Janus. What did you study and what first sparked your interest in technology, AI, and the renewable energy sector, respectively?
I first started my career as a chef, and while working as a chef in the UK, I studied did a diploma in film. And when I got back to South Africa, I did my first degree in education in natural science. From there, I did an MBA in finance and investment in the UK, and I moved back to complete my BSc honors in molecular biology and plant science. I then started my first PhD in curriculum development, and started my career. Now, the one thing I want to mention here is transferable skills. I think a lot of young people have an idea that you end up in a job that you studied for. And I think for most people, that's actually not the case. Higher education actually helps you to develop a skill set which you can use in various different contexts. So after finishing my degrees, I worked in academic literacy, and I worked as head of learning technologies, because, as I mentioned, my PhD was in curriculum development, but I specifically focused in blended learning. I'm currently working as a researcher in the energy sector, and I think a lot, like every degree had a component of research skills that I developed that helped me.
I think I like what you said about how we envision ourselves working essentially what you studied for, and not necessarily different skills that you learn from what you studied. Tebogo, what did you study and what first sparked your interest in renewable energy and AI?
Yes, no, thank you, Nolukanyo. So my background is business science. I'm a commerce guy. I studied my honors level business science at a university in France. And then when I came back to South Africa in 2012, I was fortunate enough to get an internship it was an Italian company at the time. And I obtained this internship right after completing my studies. And then during the course of me working at this company, I also embarked on a master's program. This master's program was done with a university in Germany, where I studied in the field of what we call sustainable finance. I completed that in 2022, and then after I completed my master's, and obviously it was big decisions. Do I do a PhD, or do I venture into risk taking and doing a startup? The decision was just ultimately driven by the passion and the curiosity and the drive to learn more about the possibilities around AI, which was at the nascent stages at the time. And yeah, I ended up completing my master's, and then immediately, not immediately, but shortly afterwards, I chose the route to do a startup. as opposed to doing in the PhD, because at the time, the thinking for me was that I'll probably learn more being at the forefront of sort of what is a new technology to all of us. So in a nutshell, this is me. I also can't underestimate the experience, because I spent 12 years working in the sector. So to anyone who's listening, also working is part of learning, right? As much as being in research is fun and cool, you actually do learn a lot by just being out in the field and actually doing the work.
When I got my first job out of varsity, I would say, you learn a lot more on the job than you did when you were in varsity. Yes, you're obviously researching, but you learn a lot more on the job. So I definitely relate to that.
Just to ask you, gentlemen, how have your previous roles in the different departments you were part of helped you build a mission-led led up startup? So I think I'll start with you, Tebogo, and then we'll move.
I think foundationally, my working experience is renewable energy. Renewable energy, from the beginning, the mission is always about alleviating reliance on fossil fuel generation. So I think for me, really, um, it's having an interest in clean energy. It's having not just on the production side, but also things like policy, green finance, and all of these components of clean energy and the just energy transition. So I think for me, it was just an interest and a drive, and also a need, right? When you see a need, when you see that, that weather patterns are becoming much more harsher than they were, and rainfall patterns are becoming harsher, and so on, you see a need, right? So there's also that aspect of how do I contribute. The need on the African continent is, we need a faster deployment of clean energy projects, or clean energy assets.
All right, thank you for that. And Janus, from an academic point of view, how has from starting from the point where, as you mentioned, that you're here because of mostly transferable skills and not entirely what you studied for, how has that led to where you are right now, using those transferable skills to basically transition into the position that you're in right now?
So I'm going to answer this question wearing two hats. So I'm actually also an entrepreneur, and currently trying to set up my own company. And I think what Tebogo said so well is identifying a need. So the one hat is me as an entrepreneur, and the second one is me as an academic. So I also teach health entrepreneurship. And speaking again to what Tebogo said about identifying a need, the first thing I do in the entrepreneurial course is I tell students to map out the health system, especially because starting a company within the health sector is, you need to navigate a lot of complexity and bureaucracy and so forth. And if you understand the ecosystem, then it's a lot easier to identify the gaps where there's a need that you can work on, and navigating the bureaucracy to start. So need is important, interest is important. And I think for my own career as well, everything I've done has been out of a point of interest. So I'm continually learning on the job. And I think that is something I find so exciting about my career, is that I constantly engage with new things. And having kind of to do a deep dive to develop those skills. And part of that has been, on this journey, thinking about generative AI and thinking about how Gen AI can shape the world. Now, both in academia, but also in business. Now, I think three things that's very important is the entrepreneurial mindset. And that includes growth mindset, which means that you recognize that your skill set is not set in stone. You can actually develop everything about you if you're willing to do so. The second component to that is grit. I think especially whether you work for a company or whether you have a startup, is you need to see things, you need to see things through, and that means failing upwards. So you are going to make a lot of mistakes. Just make sure that those mistakes actually lead to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I think the other thing is every context teaches you something. So every job I've had so far has actually helped me think about my entrepreneurial venture. So I have developed strategic thinking. I've tested business models. And all of the cumulative knowledge that I've developed in everything I've done has helped me to, be ready now to be a startup founder. So yeah, I think, as I mentioned, growth mindset, grit, but also strategic thinking, those are important skills, whether you're an academic, whether you want to be an entrepreneur, or whether you want to work in a company. And then also just authenticity, being yourself, and also not letting ChatGPT do all the work for you.
As you mentioned, you're in academia and you're also an entrepreneur. How does a typical week look like for you?
In the evenings, I work on my startup, and during the day, I work on my academic job. So I think that's the other thing that you highlight, is that you need to be willing to make sacrifices, to actually realize dreams you have. So during the day, I work on very different projects. My interest is quite broad. So I work on energy sector projects, researching that. I am currently working on virtual reality and AI for learning. So thinking about how can we actually use virtual reality to enhance education and so forth. And in that space, I'm going to appoint like 20 interns helping me develop systems and software to actually build digital twins with, and so forth. I work on strategy, on policy development, specifically for education, because my third lens is that I actually do a lot of curriculum development research and thinking about how to do instructional design, and so forth. So the other thing is flexibility, and being able to project manage yourself and your and all the different projects that you work on. So you really need to develop good time management skills and so forth. I know that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So you also need to schedule, and it causes burnout. So you do need to schedule some time to go rock climbing and hiking and so forth. So I try not to, at least one day a week, do something fun, take my motorbike out and go explore a new place or something like that, just to relax a little bit as well. So it's not just about work. I do work hard, but I also make sure that I schedule breaks, because even that's important to just think creatively.
I like the fact that you're not romanticizing the entire process and you're saying that burnout will be there if you don't take care of yourself. So I'm glad you pinpointed that out, because many people, especially when they start on new ventures, it's always grind, work, and they don't necessarily take care of themselves in the process of all of that. So thank you for highlighting that part. Tebogo, on yourself, how does a typical week look like?
A typical week.
Yes.
It's unpredictable. I thought you would say day, Wandile. A week.
We could do days.
A typical week is very unpredictable.
Yeah.
So I think the interesting part about building an enterprise, a startup enterprise that is not yet sort of getting to what we call product market fit, or not yet at the stage where you can actually say that, I have this track record and I can get customers. You actually you actually end up spending a lot of time sort of, doing multiple things just to, yeah. So for example, I also consult, you name it. It's just, they call it hustling, but you consult, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, just to, uh, firstly, just to make sure that the basics are taken care of. But in terms of the actual enterprise itself, a typical day would start with, well, I wake up early, 5 o'clock up. I take a walk. When I walk, I listen to a podcast. I listen to mainly sort of motivational podcasts when I walk. So I realize that also helps me sort of figure things out. And then after my walk, then I'll come back. I'll generally sort of meet with my team, my data scientist, and then we'll plan out the day, and then we'll maybe sort of scope out what needs to be done. I'll get into, for example, our tools like your Slack, checking basically what needs to be done from a project management point of view. So project management is a lot. There's a lot of project management in what I do, and then typically the rest of the time we're especially when we're deving products, when we're deving sort of solutions and really honing in on our research, we spend a lot of time doing a lot of design thinking. There's a lot of ideation. There's a lot of preparation. There's a lot of thinking things through. There's a lot of calling this person to run an idea past them. There's a lot of we're part of also the Intel Liftoff initiative. So our engineering comes from Intel's engineering team. So there's a lot of touch points with Intel and their engineering team, and we'll run past certain things, and we'll run past maybe a problem that we're unable to solve, and we'll try to crack a solution. So the day ends up being sort of very up and down,
Mm.
but yeah, typically it's a lot of grit, as Janice mentioned. It's a lot of grit. It's a lot of self-discipline. It's a lot of sort of getting burnt, but yeah, getting burned along the way. There's a lot of that. And yeah, it's about staying positive. Definitely. Oh, another interesting right now is that we're at a stage where we're doing product testing. That is an entire journey altogether. So it entails, so for example, last night I had to meet with someone who's based in the US, because of their time differences, and I had to pitch, what the product testing environment would look like. And it's it's very unpredictable, but yeah, it's about grit, it's about determination, it's about discipline. um it's about staying positive, like I said. Like when I take my walk and with my podcast and stuff like that, it really builds up into the day. There's some habits that you can build along the way, that you can think immediately that this is not a good habit. So for example, a habit that I had to let go of was checking my emails in the morning. um that just made me more stressed. um so there's things like that, and you learn your strengths and you learn your weaknesses as time goes, and yeah.
What are some of the hard lessons you've learned along the way?
I think the one takeaway is that we should always have the willingness to learn. Looking at the very start of my career right up until where I am right now, it's just that willingness to learn. um there's some people who I've worked with who had the ability, or who had the yeah, they had the ability or the know-how, but they were not willing to learn, or they were not willing to actually work. So I think for me, learning that lesson of having the willingness and having the ability to actually do the work. They say, in sports, they like to say that attitude trumps talent, right? So you can have you can have a very talented person, but their attitude their attitude ends up ruining it for them. So having the right attitude, having the right sort of, yeah, having the right, knowing what to learn, and saying that this is not for me. So I think that's the biggest lesson, in terms of broadly speaking on my career. I think building an enterprise is completely different. Building an enterprise, you're learning lessons every day, right? So you're learning lessons like especially if you're building a tech enterprise. So for example, you're learning lessons about, which system not to use, and which system maybe works better for you. You're continuously learning when you're building an enterprise. So I think when you're building an enterprise, you're probably learning more lessons about business and what is possibly going to make sense for your enterprise, but you're learning those lessons all the time, right? And I think you should receive those lessons with grace, because you might fail. I mean, you will fail. Actually, you will fail, and you will learn. But just be kind to yourself when you learn those lessons. At least this is what I've learned when building an enterprise.
Thank you for that. Janus, what are some of the hard lessons you have learned in your career and trying to build a startup?
So I think the hardest lessons I've learned is one, that you are replaceable, but that shouldn't determine your value, because a company would make your role redundant, if there's no finances or so on, and then you just have to roll with the punches and get up and find something else. The second lesson is that in 2020, I started working for a startup that focuses on the training and development space. So I basically came in for leadership and talent development. The whole idea was using AI systems and so forth to tailor training and development. And I was not a fit for the company. It was a very toxic work culture, and expectations wasn't clear, and so forth. And that could really demotivate someone if you don't know what your own value is and so forth. I resigned and found something else, because the other thing that I think a lot of people hold on to is that you see your work as your income, so it's your way to survive. So a lot of people just stay in a place that they are really unhappy. And I think what you need to realize is that you have the power to quit and move to something where you could be happy. I moved to Wits and I've had 5 amazing years at Wits so far. Tebogo mentioned that very well, in terms of that you need to become a jack of all trades. And you need to be open-minded to learn along the way. I mean, and you need to figure things out, because you don't have the resources to appoint 400 people to solve all the different issues for you. So you need to be very conscious of what you have and seeing how you can work with that to solve the problems that you need to solve. And that requires you to develop a whole range of skill sets, and navigating policy and doing this and doing that. Being adaptive, I think, is also an important skill to have.
And would you say that your definition of success or impact has changed as you have grown?
I think I've always defined success not just financial. I think success is a whole range of things. The first thing is your impact on society. Do you actually make a contribution to society? Do you enrich yourself? Do you travel the world? Do you become a better human being for other human beings? Do you nourish friendships and relationships? Because I mean, one thing I've heard, yes, I said I work a lot, but there's this very famous saying, as nobody on their deathbed wished they worked harder. Everyone wished that they chased the dreams that they didn't, or that they traveled, or that they spend more time with family and friends. Nobody wished that they worked harder. And I think if you build that into your definition of success, that it's not just about financial, you'll also be a happier person, I think.
Tebogo, has your definition of success or impact changed as you've grown?
You know what? Actually, success has not really changed also for me. I think it has always been about, the kind of change that I'm bringing to communities or to society, or to, what is my ultimate contribution. And I'm fortunate in the sense that right now, my startup is effectively a research and deployment startup. So we the kind of research that we're doing is is also going to be benefiting someone in future who might be, building models for the renewable energy sector altogether. So, so I think when the topic of success it tends to be very loaded for South African context, because a lot of us have this image of success. A lot of us have, a lot of us. I mean, we see success as sort of a material, having material, all your material needs met. And to some people, that, I mean, that could be because maybe they have a different perspective on life altogether, and that's respectable, because we're all different. I just think that individually, once you set your own individual goals, you should also consider the kind of impact that you're having in your surroundings, in your street, in your town, in your village, in your community. Um, and I think success is very linked to the impact that you're having. And um it should challenge us collectively, what our idea of success is. In the corporate environment, there's many things. I think Janus mentioned some of them. The corporate environment is not a straightforward thing, right? It has its own ups and downs. And when you find yourself working in corporate, yes, you might get promoted. Yes, you might get to this level of competency. But I think it's about the kind of impact that you're making in your own corner. What impact are you making? What impact are you having on your immediate friends, family, community, um, country, right? I think for me, that's what success is. Yeah.
I think it's very important to define for yourself what success means. Otherwise, you're just gonna be all over the place.
Our experiences tend to shape what success is. That's the thing.
So I think when I was 16, my idea of success was sort of more, focused on financial, that by 25, I'm going to drive a Ferrari and, have a big house and this and that. And when I got to 25, I was actually pretty unhappy, because I was still very, very poor, trying to study, and working, like I had to put myself through university, and then you kind of see on social media that everyone else is doing so well. And then I read this very interesting paper, which I actually started to integrate, for my first years when I was working at the University of Pretoria, called "Why Generation Y Yuppies Are So Unhappy," and that was quite an interesting thing, which spoke about the fact that we do grow up because our parents kind of tell us, you're so special, you're going to change the world, and so forth, which means that we do get unrealistic expectations about life, and how fast you are going to make a success of your life. And then on the other hand, there's research, that social media makes us unhappy, because we do see that, okay, we have that your year in, and somebody else, is traveling the world and living their best life. But the thing is, you only see one side of that. You only see what they want to portray. You don't see their challenges, you don't see their struggles and so forth. But we still measure ourselves against that, and that makes us unhappy. And I think when I started to define that success is not just about how much you have, but changing it to what you can do for others, and what, and personal successes, like I mentioned, like traveling and so forth, that then you really do get to a more fulfilled life.
Most of us would want to define success based on what we see on social media, and that isn't the correct way of going about it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that success is not just like materialistic things, because especially for us, the younger generation, when we leave varsity, we're like, okay, I'm about to start working now. By 25, I want to have this, or driving this car, or staying in this place. And then when you don't necessarily obtain those things when you get to that age, then I don't want to say this, but depression starts to come. Like, why haven't I reached this? Or why am not in this level as yet? So it's very important to as we grow, essentially, not to define success in materialistic things, So I'm so glad that you gentlemen touched on that part. And basically, looking at the advice now for the future, as the younger people, what kind of roles, skills, or disciplines do you believe will shape the future of energy careers in Africa? We can start with you, Tebogo.
I think looking at what's happening in the AI space, you're potentially going to have a future where people with technical skills are actually managing what we call AI agents, or you'll potentially have, for example, one person managing maybe, I don't know, 10 or 50 agents at a time. So the agents are likely going to be the ones that are actually doing the repetitive tasks, but then you're going to be having the person with the knowledge and the skill actually managing the agents and actually signing off what the agents are doing. So I think what's evident is that I understand that not everyone is going to be, for example, a data scientist or a computer engineer or software engineer, or a data labeler or a researcher. Not everyone is particularly going to be able to do all of those kind of careers. But I think in your respective career, whether you're in energy or whether you're in banking, whether you're in finance, be the expert in your field. And even though we're talking about a world where there's the likelihood of automation, I see it more as there will always be a human in the loop. I mean, if you think about it, as we mentioned earlier with the example of the calculator, it's just a tool, right? There will always need to be a human in the loop who signs off on what the machines are doing. So what's likely going to happen is that in whatever domain that you have, yes, the machines are likely going to get better and smarter, but you're likely going to be more of someone who's actually managing these machines, or someone who's actually collaborating with these machines, likely, right? As time goes.
And maybe for you, Janus, just looking at someone out there who wants to pivot to another career, even in the energy space, or they studied for something else and they lost passion for that. Looking at the context right now of Africa, what kind of roles or skills or disciplines do you believe will shape the future of energy careers that maybe they could possibly look into and find passion there, I guess?
Entrepreneurship. There's really a lot of potential, to shape the energy sector in South Africa. I mean, while preparing for this report on batteries, there's a growth. I can't remember the figure exactly, but it was something like, a 500% growth or so on by 2030 in terms of what we need. And we need people that could do that. In terms of building a little bit about what Tebogo said, is I think, AI is not going to replace you, but a person using AI will. So you definitely need to develop technical expertise on how to build AI agents and knowing how to use or manage, machine human relationships and so forth, like Tebogo said. But one thing that is really a recurring theme at the moment around, the AI debate is that humans can't be replaced in terms of soft skills, so there will always be a human behind everything. And that would require you to be a leader. So leadership, I think, and developing leadership competence is very important. And second to that, teamwork. I think teamwork is going to become even more important, and learning how to work in digital teams, because people are now working in global teams across the world, not sitting in the same office. And that requires a slightly different skill set from just, sitting across from somebody and working in a team. So focusing on leadership, innovation, and your other soft skills, I think is something where young people should invest, and those skills are transferable into any in any sector.
And maybe just to close off, what advice would you give your younger selves and how to enter the energy space?
Curiosity and follow through. I'm not unhappy with my career, but when I did my MBA, I really wanted to go into carbon finance, the cap and trade system, and think, and I kind of fell into my career and never followed that. So I think one thing I would, and yet again, I am very happy with how my life turned out, but I think I would have said, have more perseverance and grit, and actually, and develop curiosity, learn more about the sectors and so forth, because then you also know about the emerging jobs and so forth. You shape your career, so therefore you need to take agency to learn about what's out there and what are your interests, and then grit to follow through and actually work to get there, is what I would have told myself.
Simple answer that I can give to that question is just that always think big picture. Everything that everything that I was learning at university, everything that I was learning doing my master's, think big picture. How are you going to implement this in the real world? So I think thinking big picture is something that you only fully properly learn when you're in the working environment, and maybe when you're managing actual teams. Continuously asking yourself, why am I doing this? I think it's an important skill set to have.
A massive thank you to Tebogo and Janus for sharing not just what they do, but how and why. Their journeys show us what the future of energy careers isn't just about hard hats or data sets. It's about vision, grit, and creativity. If you're listening and you've ever wondered where purpose meets innovation, this conversation is your sign to step in.
Thank you for tuning into Energy Careers, where we explore the endless possibilities in the energy sector. Don't miss out on future episodes where we'll feature more inspiring journeys and insights on how to embark on your own energy career path. Subscribe now to the Energy Conversations podcast and unlock the door to exciting opportunities in the dynamic world of energy. Your journey begins here.